Welcome to the extremely professional news on a bit of Star Wars, a bit of the old Battlefront, and EA in general. I'm Scott Tilford, that's Ewan Patterson.
Hello, I'm not a TIE fighter.
TIE fighter.
Just in case you were really scared for a second there.
He said, can we do a video that starts with a TIE fighter noise? I said, if you can do one, yes, and there you go. That's how you bring it together.
Scott lives to indulge my dreams
on
this channel.
If you can't indulge the dreams on YouTube in 2025, what can you do? But yes, the state of Battlefront as a franchise overall is an interesting talking point, and there are some ongoing conversations, let's say, as to the future of the IP. However, they tend to skew negative once you actually look at the way this stuff is coming together. People might have already seen that Battlefront 2 had a massive resurgence in player numbers, both the Steam versions, the console versions. No one seems to know what that was. That was across the last couple of weeks. Some people are saying maybe it's because of Andor.
A combination of Revenge of the Sith's re-release and Andor.
And Andor.
Peg that down to.
And there was a Star Wars Fortnite crossover event. Yes. But I also saw that Fortnite's player numbers are the lowest they've been in a couple of years, so most people are going, I'm alright. I don't need
Probably
my Star
people
Wars.
going looking at that and going, actually, I want a proper Star Wars game. No, this V-Buck nonsense.
To be fair, it could literally be that. Yeah. But either way, massive surge when it comes to Battlefront 2. However, it's worth throwing in that EA very recently said they were walking away from licensed IPs. This comes from CEO Andrew Wilson, discussing the fact that going forward they want to focus on things that they already own. He mentioned the Battlefield franchise, Apex Legends, The Sims, games like that. So his mind isn't necessarily on the Star Wars Battlefront IP going forward, nor is it on Star Wars overall. It's worth throwing in that EA also had a whole wave of layoffs, some of them coming from Respawn Studios, the guys that make the Star Wars Jedi games. We are still getting the third Star Wars Jedi game, though. This came from EA's Laura Meal during the recent closure of Cliffhanger Games and the cancellation of the open world Black Panther game. But on the Respawn front, there was a Mandalorian game in development across the last few years that was cancelled. R.I.P. The time it could have done so well.
I love this whole commitment that EA has to fumbling the bag. I still remember recording a news video with Josh Brown in 2020 when they announced that they were ceasing updates on Battlefront 2. And I couldn't believe it because there was still so much clear potential with that game. Clone Wars Season 7 was about to come out as well. The Mandalorian was going strong in its first season on Disney+. There was a whole heap of Star Wars positivity somehow in the wake of The Rise of Skywalker, and they just walked away to work on Battlefield 2042, which I want to know, how did that work out?
They then tried to make that into a hero shooter, and that didn't work very well either.
No,
executives.
So, yeah, in the wake of all this positivity around Battlefront 2 Resurgence, which is really cool to see, I think it's nice that people are coming back to that game.
Totally.
Because despite it making a very strong comeback, I think a lot of people still have the initial impressions that came about from 2017 when it released, where obviously we had all the terrible microtransactions and stuff. The game itself ended brilliantly.
Yes.
In a really, really strong state, although, albeit, with stuff unfinished. So on that note, it's nice. But I have seen a lot of people kind of saying, okay, well, now that we've got this huge resurgence around Battlefront 2, Battlefront 3 should be a no-brainer. It should be super easy to do. And the reality, as you've mentioned there, with the layoffs that have hit Respawn, we know that morale at the studio is at an all-time low, according to one of the developers there. And obviously, the Mandalorian game being cancelled, EA reiterating its commitment towards doing first-party stuff and not actually going ahead with licensable IP. Even though there's been loads of people talking about Battlefront 3 and even, former developers of DICE going, hey, let's do this.
Get the gang back together.
The reality is a lot more depressing. For all accounts, it seems as though the curse of Battlefront 3 is happening again, because as things currently stand, apart from Zero Company, which comes out next year, and the next Star Wars Jedi game, it looks like EA is done with Star Wars.
It's really weird when you think about, and there's a little bit more to this, but it is weird when you think about the dark irony that both third Battlefront installments didn't make it. There was that original version by Pandemic way back in 2007 or whatever it was going to be.
Free Radical as well, the Battlefront 3 that was going to involve Jedi clone Trooper Force
Clone Men.
There was a lot of weird expanded universe stuff. They were going to tie that into the Force Unleashed as well. There was all sorts of things that were planned that we just never got. So it is kind of
we hardly knew
the white whale of Star Wars gaming.
That is the overall takeaway, though, is that EA want to move away from these license fees, or at least that seems to be the underlying point. Because it just seems like EA is losing too much money trying to license massive IP from Disney overall. I wanted to mention, the fact that they moved away from FIFA. That was another company. They have EAFC FC, which apparently underperformed last year when they switched over the brand side of things. But I did want to mention that back in 2023, we had that massive leak over at Insomniac, like Sony/Insomniac, which revealed Spider-Man 2's budget as being $300 million, but $100 million, a third of that thing's entire budget, was just to make a Spider-Man game in the first place, to license the IP from Marvel, which I remember thinking back then that speaks to the overall landscape. If you're someone like an EA or a Sony or whatever, Marvel/Disney are going to want as much money as possible in those transactions just to license those characters. Now, I don't think the Marvel side of things is anywhere near as strong as it used to be, or the Star Wars side of things at this particular point in the decade anyway. But still, they're not going to be changing those license fees anytime soon, which is why Andrew Wilson is like, we're just going to step away from this stuff. So they still have contractual obligations. There's an Iron Man game still coming, even though the Black Panther game was cancelled. And we have 2 Star Wars projects, like you said. But after that, it seems like EA are doing what Warner Brothers are doing and just doubling down on the stuff they already own, for better or worse.
It's kind of really depressing that this is the situation we've been met with once again. It's kind of like EA has just been in a lose-lose situation with Star Wars since the beginning. I know 2015 Star Wars Battlefront, again, is looked upon more fondly today than it was when it initially came out. Obviously, you'll remember when that game came out, everyone criticized it for a lack of content, a focus on purely the original trilogy, weird sort of arcadey moments in the game itself compared to what the other Battlefront games were. And then obviously, you know, the controversies around Star Wars Battlefront 2, the numerous cancelled Star Wars games that EA had when they had the exclusive agreement on the franchise. There was the Amy Hennig Star Wars game.
I forgot about that.
There was Project Ragtag. There was Project Orca as well.
Yeah, there was a couple, yeah.
But it was going to be like kind of like a Star Wars Outlawsy type game. Loads of stuff got cancelled, and now, when everyone, you know, years later, people have returned to Battlefront 2 and realized, okay, this game is wonderful, we're at a point in time where EA is now walking away from Star Wars. So I don't necessarily know what the path forward is with this. We know that obviously a few other studios are working on different kind of Star Wars-y ideas, but, you know, if we are going to get another Battlefront game, hilariously, it probably won't be titled Battlefront 3, and it probably won't be with DICE. It'll probably be with a completely different studio.
There's also the conversation around live service elements, which everyone is sick to death of hearing about, but if you want to do a new Battlefront, you do a Battlefront 3, it would assumedly arrive with the most predatory monetizable elements possible, because even if we do get a Battlefront 3, even if they do get the developers back that want to make it, like you said before, you had different developers like Matt Helge Holm, who originally worked on Battlefront 2, saying he would love to come back, get the gang back together.
Dennis Bramwell, who was the creative director, has also chimed in and saying, you know, really positive thoughts about the game's resurgence. But
which, of course, you would be responding to, but even if they do kick something off now, it's going to take probably the next generation of consoles before we see it, and who knows what state Star Wars is going to be in. I personally am pretty tired of Star Wars as an IP, although I loved Andor Season 1 and 2. I think the quality can shine through. But in terms of a path forward overall, it makes me think of the smaller scale indie games that we're getting that are still licensed, like the upcoming Friday the 13th game, the 2D side-scroller game.
The Marvel Cosmic Invasion.
Yes, and the John Wick game.
Fun. And then there's the Texas Chainsaw Massacre game, which just got killed, but then I think there's like a Halloween game coming out as well. So
it's things like that. And you got the Mummy Demastered a good few years ago as well. Like, I think there are ways to do this, but it's always going to depend on the license fee. If someone like the Disney-sized companies aren't able to give any size team their IP, we're never going to get anything. And maybe they're waiting until Star Wars comes back around again or whatever to be in a better negotiating place. But I feel like overall they're not in a good place right now.
No, I kind of really want Arrowhead to do something. Ooh. I mean, I want them to stay with Helldivers, obviously, but I feel like someone doing like an ARC Trooper clone Commando Helldivers type game.
That's a perfect one to go with. I remember when Helldivers first came out thinking that would be the perfect thing to do. Whether it's an aesthetic choice, like certain planets on that game have like such a good laser look that made me think of lightsabers, made me think of blaster duels from different Star Wars games. And you could easily do stormtroopers and whatever in that game. Fortnite is, like we said at the beginning, is an interesting one because I feel like that would be the most, here everybody come play a little bit of Star Wars and try and test the waters kind of thing. But if Fortnite isn't responding, then I don't know if the people just want to take a break from Star Wars for a bit.
I think it would be nice if Respawn could get away from EA. That would be really lovely because then we could, you know, make their games again and not, you know, have stuff be cancelled all the time.
Yeah, I would take just games being made. It's worth mentioning. What was the name of this one?
Star Wars Battlefront 2.
No. What was the name of the one that's coming next year?
Star Wars Zero Company, which looks
Zero
really
Company.
Cool. Yeah.
So we are getting a sort of grid-based strategy game from them, which in itself is a departure from the first-person shooter stuff, the live service stuff.
Being made by BitReactor in collaboration with Respawn.
Yes. Respawn increasingly stretched thin ahead of various different projects, including Battlefield as well. But yeah, it's worth just kind of taking the full picture here, and every now and then there's enough fan swell behind something that it does kick something into gear. But I feel like it's worth just analyzing the reality of the situation, and maybe if we all keep our fingers crossed, we get Battlefront 3, but it'll be a few years from now.